when people feel taken care of, when people feel trusted, when they feel like they belong, when they feel like their work means something, they're working towards something bigger than themselves, why would they leave, right? You have to understand, we have to remember that because things like Jack Welch and layoffs have become so normalized, that young people have grown up in a capitalist system where they watch their parents lose their jobs through no fault of their own. It's not a meritocracy. You worked for a company for 20 years, you did good work. Sorry, nothing personal, it's just business. We missed our numbers. So they've watched it happen. They've watched the company not take care of their parents. And so they've been raised not to trust companies. Why should they? I think they have it right. And so they come in inherently cynical and inherently expecting that the company would happily use their job to help itself and then stupidly demand loyalty back. I don't blame them. The company sets the rules of the game. The people are just playing by the rules the company set, which is no loyalty. Or when hardship happens, the first thing cut is like all the leadership programs. It's the first thing that's cut. It should be the last thing to be cut. Well, I can't measure the ROI on that, can I? You can over time. So I don't think it's just some reality, because at the end of the day, great organizations that are well led have no problem with young people leaving every year. They just don't have it. Onesies and twosies, sure, but nothing significant. There's plenty of companies that command tremendous loyalty from young people because they're well led. So I don't think it's a new reality. I think it is, yet again, a condition of a broken capitalism. Nobody said it would be easy, and nobody said it would be fast. And I'm okay with that, as long as we're marching forwards. I just had Robert Greene on my podcast. So I brought him on the podcast and I was ready for a fight. I understand why he wrote that book. And he talks about it. He and I had a wonderful conversation. He was 38 years old, and every job he had, he was trying to be a writer. He was subjected to people who stole his ideas, stabbed him in the back, screwed him over and over from the age of 21 to 38. People who were threatened by him fired him just over and over and over. And he was exhausted, and he happened to be walking with a guy who had he was a publisher. I'd love you to write a book. Do you have any ideas? And he thought, you know what? I've been subjected to people who are jostling for power, and I'm going to write a book how I perceive power, basically to warn everybody. Put your guard up. Stop being so naive. This is what the world is. It's a little bit cynical, but that's basically what it is. The problem is he wrote it, that some people read it as a manual, but it's really a warning, be aware of how your enemy works so you won't be taken advantage of, because it's really how to manipulate people. So when you ask, what do we do? Well, first of all, you're right about the curriculum, which is the people who teach a lot of that stuff. They come from those Jack Welch ideologies, so of course they're going to choose those books. The good news is folks like me and Brene Brown and our books are starting to show up. And at the very minimum, if they show up on the same syllabus, so at least there's a debate, or better, they're replacing the old guard, So there is a movement. And I also think the practical movement is the leaders themselves. For you in your own organization to say, I reject the Jack Welch way that I was raised in. I have seen the damage it causes. We have seen economic hardship caused. We've seen families destroyed by short-termism and selfishness and shareholder supremacy. And I will not lead, and I will do everything I can to support this organization to change the way in which we lead for the good of the company. And by the way, you look at the best organizations, Apple never had layoffs. I think they've had them, Pixar had them once and they regretted it. These great organizations didn't do these things. So there's good case studies from the companies that we consider the exceptions. Well, there's a reason they were the exceptions. So I think the as a practical matter, which is this is the army right here. And you can't, and I get this question all the time. Simon, I buy into all of your stuff. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. But I'm not CEO. How do I change the organization when I'm not in charge? Where there's 4 levels up above me? What am I supposed to do? And the answer is, of course you can't change behaviors of somebody you have no contact with, even if people you do have contact with. No number of anonymously sent books to senior executives is going to change the way they lead, although I encourage you to keep trying. And the reality is you take responsibility for the environment you can control. So if you have influence over 7 people to the left, people to the right, even the boss above you, they're still a human, and even if they're difficult, let's have empathy. Maybe they're difficult because we don't understand the pressure upon them. And if we just work to create this little pocket of magic. What you tend to find is when you have well-led teams, those teams outperform all the other teams. And so senior leadership either leaves you alone, or they at least are curious and be like, what are you doing? Or somebody from the team will eventually get promoted out to another team and bring all the lessons that you taught them and lead that team the same way. And then you have 2 magic teams. And then somebody there gets promoted and you have 4 magic teams, and you have 8 magic teams. And then the CEO moves on and retires, and before you know it, the tail wags the dog. Having a top leader who understands this stuff just means it's more efficient, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. We have to remember, power always belongs to the people. That's why dictators fear people and have fake elections, because they want to give the appearance of popular support, because that's where power is derived. But dictators fear the people, which is why you can't get close to a dictator's house. You have to stay 3 miles away, and the army's given orders for shoot to kill, right? The people always have the power, always. And so what you do is you create these magical ripples inside an organization, and you don't even need to convert everybody. It's law of diffusion. You only need about 15 to 18% of the company to fully embrace the ideas, and that's it. Tipping point. So don't worry about the CEO. Don't worry about the company. Just worry about what you can control. Everyone wants to feel like they matter, right? And an aging workforce starts to feel like nobody cares about them. They don't matter. There's ageism, all the rest of it. If I'm a certain age, I can't get a job. First of all of the empathy we apply to a young group, we have to apply to an aging group, right? That's a big part of it. The other part is I always believe in asking people to solve their own problems. So one of the mistakes I think we make in business is, as leaders, we think we have to have all the answers and solve all the problems. And take anything where we commission studies and we look at the data, and then we make decisions, and then we implement a program, and we have a rollout schedule, and we have a change management consultant, and then here you go. And at no point do we ever go to the people who are actually going to be affected by our decisions and say, here's the problem we have. We're completely open to what we would do. Can you bring us some suggestions on how you would solve this? Or you can do with 2 or 3 different groups to get 2 or 3 different points of view. And I love asking people to solve their own problems, right? Because A, it gives them a sense of ownership, and B, you're going to get ideas that you never had. And I'll give you one bad example, but it'll make the point. So this company that I talked about, Barry Waymiller, so they have a big factory and they have a huge machine that it's getting old and it needed replacing. And so the way a machine is usually replaced inside a factory is somebody in procurement, in back office somewhere, puts together a spec sheet, puts together a budget, and goes out on the market and buys a machine. That's usually how it's done. That's not how they did it at Barry Waymiller, because it didn't make sense to them why you would ask an accountant to buy a machine. So they went to the 2 guys who work on the machine. One of them had worked on it for about 25 years. The other one had a high school equivalency degree. Didn't even have a high school degree. And they said to the 2 guys, we need to replace your machine. You have a budget of $750,000. Go buy a machine. And the guys went out on the open market, and they looked at new machines. They looked at secondhand machines. And the sellers said they've never had the experience. Usually people show up with a tie and a clipboard. They've never had people show up in overalls and climb into the machine before. They've never had that happen. The guys ended up spending $650,000 on a new machine. We're proud that they saved the company $100,000. And by the way, that machine will never break because it's their machine. But most companies wouldn't trust somebody with a high school equivalency degree to spend $750,000. But they are the best qualified people. My point is go to the people who are affected by the challenge and ask them to solve the problem. And just give them the safe space to do it. And if there's a budget required, give them the budget, because they will solve the problem. So that's a big one. I think it's a very simple thing, which is fear is the thing we're guarding against. People are afraid of AI. And it's not that it's going to take away our jobs. It's that I don't know what's going to happen to me. The fear isn't losing the job. The fear is what's next. And so if we think back, 30 years ago, something like 80% of the jobs that exist today didn't exist prior to the internet. IT consulting was not a robust business, where now it's standard. And so the narrative isn't your job is going to go away. The narrative is your job is going to change. And I'll give one example. I'll give me, right? So in my world, the writer is king and the editor is disposal. What AI can do is write a bad first draft. You don't really, unless it's an original idea. So let's talk about a press release. We pay a PR person a lot of money because they know how to write a press release. Right? That's the hard part. And then the rest of us get our grubby hands on it. That'll change because now ChatGPT can write a bad first draft of a press release. Editor is going to be the hero. And so we're going to replace writers with editors. And so to use that example, that the job's not going away, the balance will shift. I'll give you another example. In the United States, the IRS a bunch of years ago digitized taxes. It used to be you send in the form and teams and teams and teams of accountants read through our tax forms and they replaced it all with computers. and they offer this massive savings. You know how much the government actually saved when we digitized taxes? Zero. Because yes, they got rid of all the accountants, but then they had to boost up the IT departments because now all the computers were reading the taxes. The net savings was zero. The jobs changed. They didn't go away. They just changed. The net savings will be zero. You're going to have to pay editors more. You're going to have to pay what you used to pay writers. And so if we help people understand opportunity from this to that, you can major already in, what do they call it, in a prompter, right? That's going to become a skill, how to prompt AI. So I think we just, instead of talking about your job is going away, which is a narrative, we start talking about the new jobs that are going to be available. I think that gets people excited because, again, they're not afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of that there's no job for them. And so we start talking about all the new jobs that are going to exist, like prompt, editor, all of these things that are going to happen. I think that people will be excited to explore new, and they can still have nerves, but they won't be the uncertainty that freaks them out. So all we have to do is paint a picture of a little more certainty than we have now. I think that the ability, because computers will replace a lot of the mundane stuff, but the job of leading people can never, ever, ever be replaced by a computer. And so I think the need for leaders, the education for leaders, the curriculum for leaders is going to become more important in a highly digitized world.